always at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from offseason to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I want to talk about the 49ers roster a little bit more because we're continuing through our offseason dive as Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are doing the same thing with the roster. And they're also talking to coaching staff to try to get things established on who is coming back next year. And one of the first things you start to evaluate if you're a head coach is what the position coaches are saying about some of the depth pieces that you have on your roster. Like, let's talk about offensive line for a second. You've got Aaron Banks. He's going to be a free agent. And before you can decide on Aaron Banks, what do the natural prospects look like to take his place? If you think about just a few years ago, Aaron Banks was being drafted and Laken Tomlinson was still on the roster, but the 49ers were preparing. And at some point, Chris Foerster said, you know what, Laken Tomlinson, yeah, he's probably going to get 10 plus million out on the open market. We feel here at the offensive line that Aaron Banks is comparable. He can step in and he can play that role either as good or better than, so you can let Laken Tomlinson go. So what the 49ers are doing right now is the same sort of conversations. Now it's Aaron Banks, but that's a free agent. And Chris Foerster and his offensive line group have had conversations, and they've broke down film, and they've said, okay, we've got Ben Barch, we've got Nick Zakelj, we've got Spencer Burford. Those guys are all potential options, because do we want to count on getting another guy that's rock solid like Dominic Puni in the draft? I don't think you can always count on somebody that's plug and play that you get in the draft. Yes, if you're drafting a top 15 pick to play interior offensive line, well, then yeah, that guy's going to be able to get it done. But if you're just getting a guy in the third round like you did Dominic Puni, it doesn't mean they're always going to translate to Kyle Shanahan's scheme or to the NFL game as quickly. So with that being said, that's what's going on in these meetings is they're talking about these guys and trying to figure out which free agents they're going to be able to let go because they've got a comparable backup that they can fit in. And then if you don't have one, then you start deciding with your pro scouts, is there a guy out there that we feel is comparable? Maybe pro scouts are very high on him, and then they want to give that information to Chris Foerster so he can watch the film. So that way they can make a decision. So maybe it's not a Aaron Banks, but it's somebody that you feel you could get Aaron Banks type ability out of if you get him into the program in San Francisco, a lot like you did with John Feliciano a couple years ago. We feel like if we get John Feliciano here, he's going to play good enough that he can make up for somebody else's position. That's what they're doing right now in their evaluation process, trying to figure out who's going to be on this team. So we're going to kind of go through that a little bit. Now, this is more of an overview. I'm going to try to take the deeper parts over on Patreon because I think that this is a different type of platform. So it's going to be an overview. You're going to get to hear about almost every position. I'm going to try to get through the whole thing. If I don't, then we'll take it to a second video. But I think I should be able to get it in this episode. So it's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about which free agents are going to come back. I'm going to try to give some nuance to each decision that they're making, including those backup players that are behind, and just go through the whole entire roster and figure this thing out. Who comes back for the 49ers in 2025. And I'm also going to sprinkle in a little bit of the coaching news that has happened over the last 24 hours or so. So please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform, the number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to NHL and UFC, BetOnline is your number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. So the news about the coaching carousel that's going on in San Francisco is, of course, Kyle Shanahan is looking for a defensive coordinator. he's looking for a special teams coordinator, and now he's having to hold interviews for an offensive coordinator as well, as the league said, hey, you just can't name Clay Kubiak your offensive coordinator because you haven't exercised the Rooney Rule. And whether we agree with that type of thing for an internal elevation, I don't know. If you're getting a promotion from inside the organization, I'm not a huge fan of this. I think if it was open to outside the organization, then it made a lot of sense. But this is kind of a dormant position. We talked about this in great lengths over in the A Hill Show. Go check that out. But, it's an interesting thing. But the 49ers have started to, of course, interview offensive coordinator potential guys. And the 49ers interviewed Iowa State assistant Noah Pauley for the offensive coordinator job. And this could be a situation where it's not just he's interviewing for the offensive coordinator job, but Kyle Shanahan might find a position for him within the organization. A lot of times that's what happens. They come in, they interview, and now he's on the radar of other teams around the league. So they are going to, do the Iowa State assistant interview, and I'm sure it went well. And now the 49ers have a few more interviews to do. And once they exercise the Rooney Rule, then they can go ahead and hire Clay Kubiak if that's what they decide to do. Now, a little bit about Paulie. He was wide receivers coach at North Dakota State when Trey Lance was there, and Christian Watson as well. And then he has 5 years of coaching staff at his alma mater in Minnesota Duluth. So he's a guy that's just getting started. He's been around a little bit, a small little time with the Green Bay Packers as well in 2022. So that's who the 49ers interviewed there. Now, when it comes to special teams, the 49ers have added another key veteran, former Panthers coach Chris Tabor. He was the interim head coach in Carolina this season, and the 49ers have interviewed him as the special teams coordinator. And he comes with a wealth of experience. He's been around for a long time. And I think this is a really good sign that the 49ers are going and doing the full Monty when it comes to finding their next special teams coordinator. He's been with the Panthers for 22 and 2023. He was with the Chicago Bears from 2018 to 2021 and Cleveland from 2011 to 2017. And guess who else was in Cleveland in 2014? Kyle Shanahan. So Chris Tabor's somebody that he's familiar with. They've spent time at the same stop, and that was with the Cleveland Browns. So they've also, of course, looked at Jet Modkins. They've looked at Chris Banjo. So Kyle Shanahan is definitely finding somebody for special teams, and we can't forget Nick Sorensen is also in the mix as well. And then the new one was that the 49ers apparently are going to interview Dennis Allen. Now, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but a defensive coordinator for a lot of years, was the head coach for the New Orleans Saints recently, and the 49ers continue their search for the next great defense, special teams, and offensive coordinators. And I think we know where the offensive one is going, but we'll see. And they're still waiting to hear on Robert Saleh, so it's a good thing that Kyle Shanahan is making sure he keeps his ear to the ground and meeting with some of these other candidates, and I think that's a really good thing. So let's talk a little bit about the roster and who's going to be on this football team. The 49ers have 33 free agents out there. And just to kind of clear up a few things, they've signed a bunch of guys to reserve future contracts. These are guys that were on the practice squad or on other teams' practice squads that they've been able to sign, and they're going to be a part of the 49ers 90-man roster when training camp commences and they go through the offseason with it. It could always change as you go through the draft. But these are the names. Defensive lineman Jonathan Garvin, they had him on the practice squad almost the whole season. Sebastian Gutierrez, same thing. Teron Jackson, they added at the end of the season. Same with some of the other guys that are on this list as well. They were added towards the end of the season. But offensive lineman Zach Johnson, cornerback Chase Lucas, who the 49ers had in camp, safety Jalen Mahoney, who was an undrafted free agent, was elevated for a couple of times off the practice squad this season. Quarterback Tanner Mordecai, offensive lineman Drake Nugent, wide receiver Tariq Owens, Terrell Owens' son, tight end Mason Pline, wide receiver Trent Taylor, and wide receiver Isaiah Hodgins, who I think is a very interesting one because they bring him over. He's got a lot of size and a lot of ability, and he played with the Giants. And I'm actually going to start about that because Chris Conley is going to be a free agent. And Conley has been a fan favorite, especially after last season, especially what he did in the playoffs. I think a lot of people really liked what Chris Conley did for this football team. But I think it came back a little bit down to earth. The physical nature is there still. Pretty good special teams player usually, but he struggled on special teams a lot this year. And I think the 49ers might look to get a little bit younger at the position. And I think Isaiah Hodgins could end up being the replacement for Chris Conley. And so Chris Conley could be on the way out. I would kind of say that it's a possibility he's a bottom of the roster player for the 49ers, but I think it could also be the end of days for him in San Francisco. So I think he could be on his way out in San Francisco, and Isaiah Hodgins could actually be his replacement. Now, let's go to the quarterback position, and this one's going to be a little bit interesting because the 49ers, both backup quarterbacks are free agents, Joshua Dobbs and Brandon Allen. And I think after what was seen this year from Brandon Allen, I think the 49ers will look to go a different direction. They want to find a quarterback that can back up Brock Purdy, that gives you an opportunity to win. And I don't think Brandon Allen is really that guy. I think he's a stable guy. He's a good guy to have in the locker room, in the meeting rooms. I think he's been around. He's a veteran. But when it comes down to it and bullets are flying and you're in the pocket, Brandon Allen hasn't proven that he could be that guy to win you a game if you need him to. So I do think the 49ers will move on from Brandon Allen. Now, when it comes to Joshua Dobbs, he's already expressed that he would love to stay in San Francisco and play for the 49ers this upcoming season. Now, would that work out? Well, I think the 49ers have seen enough of Joshua Dobbs to bring him back because I think that he showed that he could win football games if he needed to. He can keep you in the mix. He can make plays with his legs, and it would be a second year of the system. So I haven't ruled out Joshua Dobbs as coming back, but it would be determined by how financially how much finances he's going to account for against the salary cap, because you might have to skimp there. So 49ers need to make some decisions when it comes to that position. So I think that when it comes to Joshua Dobbs, there's a chance that Joshua Dobbs could be back in San Francisco, where I think Brandon Allen is not as likely to be back in San Francisco. So I think right now, out of the three free agents we've talked about, I think Joshua Dobbs is the one that I can see coming back. But I could also see the 49ers looking at other options in free agency. And I think there's a lot of good options out there. But it might be smart, just like they did keeping Brandon Allen while they brought in Josh Dobbs and Sam Darnold. Maybe this time they keep Dobbs and they add a third quarterback that they hope can compete and actually beat out Joshua Dobbs. I think that would be interesting. And Tanner Mordecai could also be a part of the mix when it comes to that position. So quarterback taken care of. Now let's go to the running back position, where there is going to be three free agent running backs for the San Francisco 49ers. Let's start with the big one, Jordan Mason. And a lot of people really impressed with Jordan Mason and what he did this season. And I thought that he did a really good job. Injuries derailed what could have been a well over 1,000-yard season for a really good football player. Now the 49ers have to decide if they want to bring him back or if they want to go in a different direction, because the key thing is with Jordan Mason is that he is going to be a restricted free agent. But with a restricted free agent, it gets a little bit more interesting and complicated. And the 49ers could, of course, work out a new contract with him, and then you don't have to worry about what happens with him being a restricted free agent. But if the 49ers wish to keep him and they can't come to an agreement on an extension ahead of the deadline, then the San Francisco 49ers are going to have to make a decision what tender to put on him. And with that being said, they don't want to put an original round tender that's basically just right of first refusal, and he could end up signing an offer sheet with another team, and the 49ers basically don't have an opportunity to, if they don't match it, they don't have an opportunity. They don't get any compensation back for Jordan Mason. You just lose the player. If you put a second round tender on Jordan Mason, then he's set to make nearly $5 million. And I don't know if you really want to pay a running back behind Christian McCaffrey $5 million and have the running back room account for so much salary on your salary cap. So here's the interesting dilemma with Jordan Mason is, can you get that extension done early enough that you don't have to worry about running into the risk of the restricted free agent type dilemma of signing him to that offer sheet, bringing him in with a second round tender, all of that. I think it's going to be fascinating. In fact, I think that Jordan Mason could be a player the 49ers look to trade before that happens. I think that there could be some teams around the league that'd be interested in his services, and maybe the 49ers go ahead and trade Jordan Mason, and he works out some sort of an extension with the team he's going to. That way they can get some draft capital back, but they don't have to allocate the funds when it comes to the salary cap to Jordan Mason. So that's something to keep an eye on. Would we love to have Jordan Mason in San Francisco? Absolutely. I think that running back room is a lot better with Jordan Mason in it than not. But these are the financial decisions you have to make. And if you can get draft capital back for him, you do it. So that way you don't miss out on potentially having a player like Jordan Mason on your roster. So that's going to be a little bit of a tough one. Now, Elijah Mitchell has been marred by injuries. Last year, he shut it down before the season even started and had hamstring surgery on the hamstring he kept pulling during training camp. So it was a tough offseason again for Elijah Mitchell and a player that just can't get healthy. I will say this, Kyle Shanahan loves Elijah Mitchell. They love what he could do in this offense. He's just never there. So I think he's one of those guys that's probably not going to get a lot of attention around the league other than probably some vet minimum deals. So I don't think there's a lot of money out there for Elijah Mitchell. So the 49ers are looking to get a player that potentially they could have come compete. He might want to stay with the 49ers, a familiar system, and an opportunity to step in, especially if Jordan Mason's moving on, and compete with Isaac Rendell for running back too. And so getting him at the league minimum, I think, is a low cost and it's effective move, and they might be willing to do that. So I could see Elijah Mitchell going either way, but I'm going to lean towards him coming back for the 49ers because I think it's going to be such a low risk with the potential of high reward. But if he left too, I wouldn't be surprised. I just think Elijah Mitchell hasn't really proven, anything recently. We just saw what he did in his rookie season, but I think that's probably why he won't get as much interest around the league. Patrick Taylor Jr., he ran really well in the last game and really did a good job. But for the most part, the 49ers continually pushed him down the depth chart as he went all the way down to, running back 5 at one point on the practice squad. Had to come up eventually with the 49ers having so many injuries at the position. So I could see Patrick Taylor coming back. I think he's a maybe. I think him and Elijah Mitchell are on the fence. But I think that, Kyle Shanahan got to where he was comfortable with both players. I will say Elijah Mitchell's a lot more dynamic athletically than Patrick Taylor. But Patrick Taylor is a very physical runner. So I could see him coming back as a depth piece. I don't think he's on his way out for sure. Now, we talked about Aaron Banks in yesterday's episode, and I do believe that Aaron Banks is going to be on his way out. I do not believe he will be back in San Francisco in 2024. So that will be one starting job that is up for grabs on the offensive side of the ball. The swing tackle, Jalen Moore, I think the 49ers are going to try to bring him back. I think they're going to do everything they can to bring him back. They feel comfortable. He continued to grow. He played well. And I think there's going to be an opportunity for them to sign him to a decent contract and make him the official swing tackle in 2025. Now, he could garner some interest around the league. He put some good film out there. So we'll see what happens. But I think the 49ers have every intention of bringing Jalen Moore back. When you're talking about finances, meet ability, and how he played, I think he makes a lot of sense. And I think they really do like him and what he could be for this football team. John Feliciano, I think the 49ers would be interested in bringing him back. I just think John Feliciano might call it a career. I think he might retire. He was not able to get healthy and right and come back and help this season. So I think he could be out the door, and the 49ers might need a new player on the inside. Could it be Nick Zakelj? Could it be Ben Bartch? Yes, it absolutely could. And Ben Bartch is going to be a free agent. I think the 49ers have every intention of bringing back Ben Bartch. I think they'll give him a shot to start, and I think he'll come in and compete. And I thought that he, out of all the guys who played left guard, actually played the best left guard this season. I thought Nick Zakelj was close, but I think Nick Zakelj's best position is actually center. And I thought that Zakelj played well, but Bartch actually outplayed him. And I thought that is a good sign. They have Bartch, if they can bring him back, they could have Bartch, Zakelj, and Spencer Burford next year as an interior battery that could compete and the ability to play several positions. So I think that Bartch and Zakelj become the new John Feliciano as guys who can kind of play multiple positions. And I think that's exactly what will happen. Now, another guy that, the 49ers brought in late, they signed him off the practice squad in Arizona, is Charlie Heck. I think they might actually throw a little bit of money his way and potentially bring him back to compete. We know they'll have Matt Hennessy, and they could have Charlie Heck as well. I thought he did a pretty good job overall and wouldn't mind him in camp competing. I don't know if he'll make the 49ers 53-man roster, but I think as far as a body in camp that can come in and compete and play in case of an injury, I thought he did an all right job. So I'd like to see more of Charlie Heck, that is for sure. Now let's look at the tight end position, and you've got Eric Saubert. He's going to be a free agent. I think the San Francisco 49ers need to move on from Eric Saubert because I think they need to get better at the position. Now, if Saubert is going to be your third tight end, I'm okay bringing him back. If he's going to be tight end 2 again, they need to make an improvement there. So 49ers definitely need to do some things with him. Now, they have 2 other tight ends on the roster, not named George Kittle. They have Braden Willis and Jake Tunges. Both of them are exclusive rights free agents, which means as long as the 49ers tender them a contract, they will be back. I do expect, because they're super cheap, for both of them to be back in camp competing for a position. But I think the 49ers need to address the tight end position and the backup behind George Kittle. It has to happen. We've been talking about it for a couple years, and I'm sure I'm going to get into some of the free agent options and some of the draft options as we continue to go through the roster building. So that is the offense and how I feel about the free agents that are there. On defense, we already talked about Javon Hargrave, so I'm not going to talk about Hargrave. We all know he's not going to be with the 49ers, and I don't expect them to re-sign. Now, 2 other defensive tackles that are going to be free agents, Kevin Givens. And Givens, ended up losing the end of the season with injury, but he was pretty much hurt all season long. I think they really like Kevin Givens a lot. But it might be time to cut bait and move on and go a younger route. You have guys like Evan Anderson. You have Kalia Davis. I think they want to get better at the position with Malik Collins and with Jordan Elliott still there. You need to add another starter. It might get a little bit too crowded for Kevin Givens. So we'll see. I think there's a likelihood Kevin Givens could move on. If the 49ers decided to bring him back, I'd be fine with that. I think he's a good rotational piece and good in the reserve role. But I think Kevin Givens is probably going to move on during the offseason. I could see him ending up on another roster as one of those depth pieces. And I wish nothing but success for him in the future. Alex Barrett is going to be an exclusive rights free agent, and so is Evan Anderson. Evan Anderson will be tendered 100%. I wouldn't be surprised to see Alex Barrett because he just continually is on the 49ers practice squad year in and year out. Now, the 49ers traded for Khalil Davis during the season. Not Kalia, but Khalil. And I don't think it really worked out. I think they wanted to take a look at a super athletic defensive tackle and see what he could do. And I don't think it panned out. He wasn't able to handle double teams and really got moved around. And I think we found out why DeMeco Ryans and the Houston Texans were considering cutting him. And that's what was going to happen. If they didn't trade him to the 49ers, he was going to get waived. The 49ers ended up scooping in and get him. And so I don't think Khalil Davis will be back for the 49ers in 2025. Now, Sam Okuwanu is an exclusive rights free agent. He will 100% be tendered, and he will be back in San Francisco next year. I talked about Dre Greenlaw extensively on my last episode. I do, in fact, think the 49ers are going to find enough money to bring Dre back, so I do think he's going to come back. I'm not going to talk about number 59. No reason to talk about him. So I'll just ignore that he's a free agent entirely, and I hope he doesn't get signed by anyone else either. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. I think this is, even though I have a lot of respect for Flan and what he did this year, he played injured when 59 decided that he was just going to quit. And I have a lot of respect for Flan for what he did. And I respect the man, his improvements that he's made through the years, his development. But I do think it's time for the 49ers to get younger at the position, for the 49ers to get a more aggressive linebacker for the rotational pieces. And so I do think this is time for the 49ers to move on from Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, because I think that really his special teams has fallen off too, and it's time for the 49ers to make a change at linebacker. So I'm going to say Flannigan-Fowles is going to be out. And then we have a restricted free agent in Curtis Robinson. I kind of expect the 49ers to work out a deal before they ever have to tender him. So I think they're going to come up with a deal. He missed the season because of injury, and I think they'll work something out. He wants to be in San Francisco. He played at Stanford, and I think he was on the fringe of getting into the 49ers starting lineup. I think he could be the replacement for Flanagan Fowles, one of those linebackers you have capable of playing all three linebacker positions, can help on special teams, and really has continued to get better and better. I think he's a potential player that could come back. Charvarius Ward, we talked about him yesterday. I think he's going to be out. I don't think he's going to be back, and I think it's mutual for different reasons, but I think the 49ers are going to think fondly of Charvarius Ward and his time in San Francisco, but he's going to go ahead and be moving on. Isaac Yedem. I think Isaac Yedem is also going to be moving on. And, I think the 49ers would like to retain him. I think they liked Yedem, but down the stretch, the last game they went with Rock Yassin, who's also a free agent. I could see both of those guys moving on as the 49ers look to get younger. I think they're going to draft another player. They'll probably bring in somebody else. I think between the two, I think the 49ers would prefer Isaac Yedem, but I think he actually might be on his way out, which is going to be interesting for the 49ers. Deshaun Gibson, I think Gip tries to find another team to land. He keeps ending up coming back to San Francisco. I'm a firm believer in Gip. I like him a lot, but I know he wants an opportunity to get on the field and play. And I don't know if he's going to have that opportunity in San Francisco. They got, a very young player, Malik Mustafa, who's going to start. Now, the question mark is Hufanga. And if they could find the money to bring back Hufanga, there's really no need for Gip in that situation. But I like Gip a lot, and I hope this wasn't the end of his career. I hope he goes out there and gets another opportunity. But I don't think it's going to be in San Francisco. I think they're going to move on from him. And Rock Yassin, like I mentioned earlier, I think also a guy that could come back is Nick McLeod. And I know he didn't look good in the Detroit game. I think a lot of the defensive players didn't look good in the Detroit game. But I think Nick McLeod's a young guy. He's still, 27 years old. He's got a lot of potential. He's got that ability to play nickel and outside. And I think the 49ers could give him an opportunity where he has a full offseason to really learn the system and come and compete. And he might be the guy that replaces like an Isaac Yedem or a Rock Yassin on this roster as somebody that could, stick with the team and potentially, be able to do some things. And so I like Nick McLeod being on the 49ers team next year. So there was a lot of guys that we talked about that it was like, oh man, they're probably going to be gone. And I think that's going to happen for a lot of the role players. There are some of the offensive linemen I think that are going to come back, like Ben Barch and Jalen Moore. I think those guys will come back. Maybe Charlie Heck on a cheap contract. But these guys are not exactly, minus the interior offensive line, these guys are not really needle movers. The only guys who are needle movers that they need to get back are Drake Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. For the rest of it, it's depth, but it's guys that you have to count on as you go through the season. Now, we do need to take a look at special teams, and there's some interesting ones here. Mitch Wishnowsky, I expect him to be back. He's not a free agent. I just wanted to bring that up because Pat O'Donnell is a free agent. Pat O'Donnell will not be with the 49ers next season. He will not be on the 90-man roster. Jake Moody, of course, is right here. I think Jake Moody is going to get some competition. I don't know if he's going to get cut pre-training camp. I don't see that. I think it's going to be competition through training camp and preseason. But I do think Moody will be back at least through that. But he's going to get pushed and he's going to get challenged. And those are going to be some interesting things, as we get into the offseason, is how some of those things go. Now, we talked about some of the reserve contracts, some other guys that they had signed. They brought in Jalen McKenzie. His dad used to be the general manager of the Oakland Raiders, Reggie McKenzie. And Jalen McKenzie played at De La Salle in Concord, California. So a local guy comes back. Another one, Russell Gage. So they got some wide receivers on here that could come in and compete next year. So it's going to be interesting. But those are the free agents and, who could potentially be on their way out. The 49ers exclusive rights free agents. We went over most of those. The one I didn't mention was Austin Pleasance. I don't think they're going to tender Austin Pleasance a contract. Maybe they will. I think guys like Evan Anderson and Sambo Kawanu are guaranteed. Jalen Graham, maybe. But I mean, I don't think Jalen Graham has proven to be the player that everyone was hoping that he could be. So that is the 49ers free agents, 33 of them. Potentially you don't really have that many coming back, for the 49ers. Let me go over, my list here and tell you like how many I think are coming back of the 33. I have 9 to 10 of the 33 coming back, which means the 49ers are going to be replacing 23 guys, when it comes to free agency. So it's going to be interesting. There's still going to be, some of the guys that are going to come back when it comes to restricted free agents or exclusive rights free agents. So the number will probably jump up closer to 15 of those 33. You're still talking about like 18 guys going out. So it's going to be interesting. Let me know who you think is going to come back. Which guys that I talk about that I thought were going to come back, you say, hey, for sure that guy can't come back. I'm interested in that because we're moving towards, getting this 49ers roster built. And it starts with knowing who you're going to bring back so you know which holes you have to fill. We talked about the Aaron Banks hole. That has to be filled for sure. Now, decisions have to be made on defense still. You have to fill the Javon Hargrave defensive tackle role that needs to be filled. That's a guarantee. Then you have to decide Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. You don't have guys ready to go. I don't think D. Winters is ready to step into Dre Greenlaw's role, which means you got to get someone. And I don't think they have a safety. I don't think Jair Brown is the answer next to Malik Mustafa. So another answer there. Holes to fill means now we can start putting together what is the necessary positions to go ahead and attack during the offseason. So now we can start putting the positions of need in order. It's going to be a lot of fun as we progress through the offseason. Thank you guys for joining. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening to audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.